Ladies and gentlemen, thank you for standing by and welcome to the USMMA Superintendent Call with the National Parents Association. At this time, all lines are in a listen-only mode, and later we will conduct a question-and-answer session with instructions being given at that time. And if you should require assistance during the call, please press star then 0, and an operator will assist you offline. And as a reminder, tonight's call is being recorded. I would now like to turn the call over to our host, Mr. Keith McLiberty, President of the National Parents Association. Please go ahead, sir.
Thank you, Kenny, and good evening. I just take a minute and a half. On behalf of the NPA Board of Directors, we want to welcome everyone to the second teleconference we're hosting with Admiral Buono since his arrival at the Academy. Before we begin, we just want to first express our thoughts and prayers for our fellow parents and midshipmen who are in the cities and towns throughout this country that are getting hit hard by the coronavirus, whether it be Michigan or Florida, Louisiana, or Seattle, and especially the New York metro area. Our thoughts and prayers are with you. We have many parents who are first responders, and they're on the front lines of this new type of battle, and we say thank you and stay strong. To our midshipmen who are at sea and across the globe on this evening, they and their parents are also in our thoughts and prayers. Life as we've known it has changed, and we're in a state of unknown in so many aspects of our lives, whether it be loss of jobs or trying to put food on the table to diminishing incomes. So much is up in the air. And as parents, we don't like the unknown. We don't like the unknown for ourselves, and we don't like it for our sons and daughters. Both the NPA and the administration feel that in times of crisis and when the unknown is mounting, over-communicating is essential. Tonight is another forum for communications to take place between our two organizations that are bound together by the midshipmen, young men and women who are the best this nation has to offer. Rowing together, we are stronger, and we'll get through this better at the end. We've used Facebook and emails and videos to communicate during these difficult times, and tonight we're using a teleconference with Admiral Buono. The more we communicate, the better we will be as we navigate these troubling times. Admiral Buono is the 13th Superintendent of the Merchant Marine Academy. He took the helm in November of 2018 and has been our superintendent for almost a year and a half. He brings a career in the maritime industry with him. Prior to his appointment, he served as CEO of Sea River Maritime, an ExxonMobil subsidiary. He is an alumni, which makes a big difference when it comes to leading this institution and leading its midshipmen. He has been open, forthcoming, and transparent. We appreciate the way he and his team communicates with the NPA, and he respects all stakeholders in his approach and his communications. Ladies and gentlemen, I turn it over to our Superintendent, Admiral Buono.
Thank you very much, Keith. And Brian, to you as well for helping us set this up. I really appreciate the opportunity. It means a lot to have over 500 parents choosing to spend a Tuesday night listening to an old guy from New York. But it's also very encouraging that we have that kind of leadership coming from our parents, that kind of support, that kind of interest. It's a real significant enabler to the success of this academy during all times, but especially while we're navigating these turbulent, uncharted waters. I'd also like to thank George Rindans for helping Keith and Brian pull this off and bring us together through this telecon, as well as my leadership. Joining me as a co-host, we have Deputy Superintendent Rear Admiral Sue Dunlap, our Dean and Provost, Dr. John Ballard, and our Commandant, Captain Mike Stroud. I appreciate all of what they are doing here at the Academy to help us, and I'd like to share a lot of that with you tonight. But again, a big thanks to the parents to come out in force tonight to listen to what I hope will be information that you will find enlightening. And I'll tell you that this isn't the end of our communicating. As Keith mentioned, we really do want to try to, at the risk of over-communicating, make sure that all of our stakeholders are abreast of what we're dealing with. I don't want to keep any secrets from you. The ability to get the support from our parents requires that I share that information, and our leadership is committed to doing that. I hope this call tonight finds that you're all safe and healthy. Please follow all the CDC, federal, state, and local recommendations. Keep each other safe. We're in the epicenter in New York right now, but this enemy knows no boundaries, and as you see on the news every night, it's changing on a daily basis. Please be careful. Please be safe. You may have seen that we previously reported that we've had 2 confirmed cases of the COVID-19 virus among our family here at Kings Point. We have roughly 20 folks on any given day at the Academy doing the necessary tasks to keep this place running and the lights on. We reported those 2 cases, and I'm pleased to report that they are recovering. They are recovered in 2 cases. I did find today that we did have another case diagnosed today of another part of our family that has been diagnosed with the COVID virus. We trust that they will recover as well. I'm deeply saddened, though, to report to you that a member of the family of one of our family has lost a parent due to the virus. So it's a very, very sad point in the history of our Academy as well as the country and the world. But I want to point out that our prayers and our support to these individuals is constant, and it's there. I'd like to start by taking the time to review with you what's been going on at the Academy and how we're navigating through these waters. And let me start by saying I'm confident that together we'll overcome this challenge. Please understand that it is my commitment to you, our leadership's commitment to you, to keep you informed. We're doing it through videos, social media postings. We've been trying to do just that. Keep in mind that each of the service academies has their own vehicle for communicating. I'm in contact with the other superintendents of the Federal Service Academies weekly on Friday, and they each have their own preferable manner in which to communicate. A couple of the institutions use emails. Emails is less effective for us than social media posting, so keep that in mind. And at the end of our conversation, I'm going to ask that Keith and Brian make an effort to inform you yet again what are the channels of communication that the Academy is using so that we can further connect. Over the last week alone, we've gained over 1,000 new followers in our social media, so I believe that's happening. I encourage you all to do that. If you haven't connected to Kings Point, either through the USMMA webpage or as well our Facebook and Twitter sites, I'd ask you to please consider to do so. Many old school folks like myself, don't like to engage in social media. Facebook was one of them, but I encourage you to think about doing it. Your children understand it, and to the extent that you're able to do that, there's a lot of information waiting for you through those channels. I'd like to start by taking us back to the beginning, 3 weeks ago, and I think it's important to look at where we've come from. I remember talking to Keith and Brian as well as with our leadership to decide whether we're going to bring our midshipmen back after spring break. And up till that Friday, towards the end of spring break, the plan was to bring them back. We were really looking forward to having that. The commandant, the dean, all of us, the DEP Sup, have detailed plans on how we were going to manage that, how we were going to manage keeping them distanced and observing the requirements that were in place at that time. But it was up until that Friday morning, we decided that we were going to do that, and we were all holding hands with that. But then we got a piece of information that Friday morning from North Shore Hospital, which, as you know, is our primary care for the welfare of our midshipmen. Up until Friday morning, our contingency plan, should we have a midshipman that is experiencing flu-like symptoms, was to send them to Patton, and then they would be transported to Northwell, where they would be tested for the virus. And if they tested positive, they were going to go into isolation there at the hospital. As of that Friday morning, though, we received an update from the hospital that said, no, the population of our student body are not the at-risk population, and they would be returning that infected midshipman back to the academy to save beds for the more at-risk population. While we understood that, that tilted the apple cart, so to speak, because we knew we would have no way of safely isolating multiple midshipmen at the academy, and that was the driver for the reason that we decided, unfortunately at the time, to not call them back after spring break. Obviously now, as we look back over the last 3 weeks, I think it was fortuitous that decision was made. I would not like to think of how we would be trying to manage our students here at the Academy in the face of what's happened in New York over the past 3 weeks. So I will tell you that I want to begin the discussion on where we've come from by saying, again, I've said it several times, how much I appreciate and commend our Dean and Provost, Dr. Ballard, and his faculty for putting in really an extraordinary amount of work and hours to bring to the Academy a distance learning capability. That Friday, we didn't have that capability. It was within a very short time that they were able to produce it. And there's still working issues with that. Don't get me wrong, I'm receiving, and I've talked to a couple of midshipmen today, overall, it seems to be working. As we get deeper into distance learning, obviously we're going to learn things and we're going to have problems that need to be addressed. And we're set to do that. If your midshipman is struggling with anything related to academics, please have your midshipman channel that through the dean's office. And if it's something to do with supplies out of their barracks, et cetera, that is for the commandant's staff to manage. So that's the way we've divided that. Anyway, I wanted to mention that my thanks and appreciation to the faculty runs deep. There was extreme acting on verve that they pulled this off. And I'd also like to say that our deputy superintendent has managed keeping this place running, the lights on, sterilizing all of the facilities on the Academy with the hope that we will be bringing our midshipmen back. I'll talk about that in a little while. And obviously, the commandant's staff are staying in contact with our midshipmen, trying to scope out how they could mail laptops and get equipment for them. And I feel really good of what they've been able to produce where there's no rule book that exists to manage it. They've created their own, and it's working really well. I'd like to tell you, as we get into the questions that were submitted, let me make it a point to state what our priority is. And the way I can do that best is just to remind everyone what the mission of the Academy is. The mission of the Academy is to, here's the word, graduate leaders of exemplary character. We are committed to do that. We have never failed to deliver on this mission, and we will continue to deliver on this mission through this challenging time. So our priority is to graduate the class of 2020. That doesn't mean that we don't have issues that need to be addressed for the classes that follow 2020, but the issue of graduation is imminent, and it does have the focus of our attention. I'll describe to you very quickly how we're going about managing that, but I don't want you to leave this conversation, this teleconference, without hearing me say, we are committed to making it happen, and I'll go out on a limb and say, it is going to happen, and we will make sure that it does. The issues that we face in dealing with this pandemic as it impacts our Academy and our Academy operations are quite considerable. There are many, and we want to make sure as a leadership team at the Academy that we don't fail to overturn a rock, to look under every rock as to possibilities of what we might need to do over the next month or two. We don't want to take for granted that our lead case is going to work and then find out a month or two from now, oops, we can't do that. We have to go down a different road. If we need to go down a different road, we need to explore how that works now and what we need to have in place to resource that, and I can assure you we're doing that. One of the things I've relied on in terms of a management practice with complicated issues like this is to develop a decision-making tree, a flow chart, where you ask if this happens, yes, no. If no, you do this. If yes, you do this. It's going to be a pretty comprehensive list, and we're working through all of it. From how we graduate, the different ways we can graduate, to what does license examinations look like, what are the different ways that could possibly happen, what are the alternatives there, what about graduation, what are the different alternatives to how you can graduate. But let me go back to our lead case. Our lead case is to administer license exams at the Academy in O'Hara Hall, followed by a bell ringing and followed by a graduation. That is the lead case. I reviewed that with the Marine Safety Office of the Coast Guard, their credentialing group, the folks that would administer the exam, and we are on the same page. That is their lead case. That is their priority, to administer the license exam to the class of 2020 here at the Academy. So when you hear me talk about potentially different options we're exploring, please don't forget what I've just said. Our lead case and our objective is to administer the license exam at the Academy, followed by bell ringing, followed by graduation. I'll talk about each of those as I move forward. Having said that, I also want to let you know that in addition to prioritizing the license examination here at the Academy, our Coast Guard has really been quite progressive in helping us work through a myriad of issues. I mentioned in a video the steps that they're taking and the concessions that they're providing to allow our midshipmen under difficult times to get more seat time to qualify for their exams. So you may have seen it published. I've mentioned it in a video. Again, everything from 1.25 for each day at sea, where it used to be 1 for 1, for 20 days on ROS vessels, and it goes down a long list of concessions. All of these things are good and will help. In terms of being able to sit for a license, you may recall that our engine midshipmen are required to have advanced firefighting before they could be allowed to sit for their license. That's changed. The Coast Guard is going to allow our engine midshipmen to sit for the license exam, whether or not they've been able to achieve that certification yet. They will need to get the certification before they're issued their credential, but that will not prevent them from sitting for the exam. Another good piece of information, and again, I will tell you this is late breaking, so I don't have the actual course for you, but we'll find that out. I found out today that the Coast Guard has approved an online training course for advanced firefighting. For those of us who thought that advanced firefighting would require them to pick up a hose and pull on a nozzle, no, that's firefighting 101. Advanced firefighting is all about team firefighting, and there is an approved online course. We'll get that out to you so you're aware of that. I also found out today that there's a firefighting school in New Jersey that has resumed operations. So it's just one example where the Coast Guard is working to try and help that issue. And if you're interested in more information on those concessions, it's publicly available, and I'm willing to take a question in that regard after we finish these questions. We'll have a question and answer period where I can talk more about that. As far as the license examination, yes. The what if, what I described to the Coast Guard as our lead plan would be a decision-making date at on or around May 1st. In New York, you understand that the rules require us to be self-isolated. We can't have groups of 10 or more, and that goes through April 29th. And on May 1st, we will need to make a decision based on what the world looks like at that point in time as to whether it's safe to bring our midshipmen back. Obviously, we will not bring midshipmen back to the campus unless we feel that it's safe to do so. Describing this to the Coast Guard, they have expressed flexibility because what I told them is our lead case is what I just told you, administered exam here, bell ringing, graduation. What our plan would be is to look at the weeks as they progress, starting with administering the exam the first week in June, and have the ability to delay that week by week till the end of July, that we have that period of time to administer an exam and graduate our midshipmen here at the Academy. The Coast Guard supports that. They will have their administrators of the exam mobilized and ready to support us throughout that potential delay period. What our plan would be is to bring our first-classmen back as soon as we could, recognizing that that may require that they go into self-isolation for 2 weeks. That is not an affirmative thing. We're just planning for that. If that were to happen, our commandant with his staff have determined that we can keep our first-class midshipmen self-isolated with appropriate social distancing for 14 days. That recognizes that we would have to have food service, medical service, and all that. So that's a given. Obviously, we would need that. And with that as a provision, we can manage the isolation of our midshipmen for that length of time here at the Academy. Well, if we weren't to need to do that, then during that 2 weeks of isolation, they would be undergoing license prep, much the way they're doing from home now through distance learning. They can do distance learning through Blackboard and Zoom from the barracks. So at the end of those 2 weeks, let's say we're able to get them back here on May 15th. At the end of the 2 weeks, we would be ready for a license exam the first week in June. The Coast Guard supports doing that. We follow the license exam with a bell ringing, and then we would have a graduation at the Academy. I will tell you, this is just preliminary information. It's very difficult to order tents and plan on a big event on Toome Field without knowing which way this pandemic is going to move. So I've made the decision this year that we will likely have graduation in Delano Hall. And the reason why I mention that is the Commandant's already told me that for food service, he will be able to socially distance our first-classmen by using both ends of each table in Delano Hall, and that will all be 6 feet apart. So we can't move the event tents from week to week, but we can set up Delano Hall with live streaming and all the resources needed to conduct the graduation there effectively for a period that could extend beyond 2 months. We control that. Right now, today, as I'm speaking to you, that's our lead case. That's subject to change. Remember, I want to provide you as much information as I can, but in return, I hope you'll respect the fact that if we had a call tomorrow night, some of this may very well change. But I'd like you to understand where your leadership is. Yes, I am a graduate. I know the significance of what it felt like. I'm an old man now, but I remember what it felt like to throw my cover into the air. I know what it felt like to ring that bell. I do not want to gyp any graduate of Kings Point from that experience. I intend to the greatest of our ability to allow them to have that experience. If whatever happens that we have to go a different route, I'm still not going to forget that. And if we have to provide that at a later date, I intend for them to be able to do that. So that's the plan for, administering our preferred lead case. So keep in mind, I said we have to uncover all the stones. All the what ifs, and there's a lot of them. So let's say we go through the entire summer and we're not able to graduate or administer a license exam at the Academy, or perhaps won't even be able to graduate from the Academy. What then, Superintendent? Well, the decision tree says we have to explore alternate venues for a license exam. I will tell you we're exploring many different cases, not just the U.S. Coast Guard regional examination centers. We're also contemplating breaking new ground with the Coast Guard and maybe on a one-off basis, perhaps looking at multiple venues where they could mobilize a larger staff and administer exams at many different locations. I'm mentioning this to you. I've had a discussion with the Coast Guard. It's not feasible for them yet because under their orders, until we get into May, they can't even consider it. But they recognize why would we ask, and I've also said that we would be able to consider providing resources to allow that to happen. I mention this only as a way of fleshing out how all of these alternatives could work. So those are several different alternatives as to how we could have the license exam administered, including here at Kings Point. And then graduation. Again, the preferred lead case is to graduate our midshipmen here. If it became necessary to do it a different way, I've been in touch with the other Service Academy superintendents, and there's a lot of different variations. From a purely virtual graduation, I will thank Keith McLiberty. He came forward and said, Admiral, in talking to Jim Tobin and the President of the Alumni Association, we were talking about possibly getting together and maybe in our various chapters, 26 or so around the country, maybe if it came to it, we could do a virtual graduation, but maybe get the midshipmen in our area together so at least there could be a venue where they can meet with their fellow shipmates and families to enjoy even that virtual experience. These are great ideas. That came from the Parents Association. I think it's a great one. I don't want that to be the lead case, and it isn't, but it's nice to know that we can consider potential alternatives. So there's a virtual graduation. There's graduation here at the Academy. There's what I call virtual and venues, which I just described. So we'll continue to look at all the different possibilities, but again, going back to our priority is to graduate leaders of exemplary character. We are writing the next chapter in the history of this academy. We're all a part of that experience. We're going to scratch our heads nights and weekends to make sure we're considering everything and anything we can do to get the job done. What I want to do now is to talk through the questions that I received from the national parents, and then I'll open it up to questions after that. Some of these I think I may have already addressed with the discussion about moving forward. Let me answer one question before I do that. The question is, are you saying you're not going to bring back the rest of the regiment and finish the third trimester in distance learning? No, I haven't said that, nor has the dean. I will say, though, it's moving in that direction. That decision hasn't been made, but it is possible within the next 3 weeks we may make that decision depending on how things are progressing. Keep in mind right now, and I think if you've been watching the news, you can appreciate what I'm saying. There's one thing to be able to bring midshipmen safely back to the academy. It's another thing to consider whether it's safe for them to leave wherever they're at. This virus is changing on a daily basis. All of that needs to come together in a way where we can ensure the safety of our midshipmen. Based on that information, we will need to make decisions. One of those decisions might be to finish the school year out with distance learning. I know there's been information circulating that that decision has been made. It has not. But the decision is going to have to be addressed sometime within the next 30 days. And we will let you know when we've addressed that decision. I am hopeful that things will change positive. We would love to get the midshipmen back here. It's not going to make sense to bring the regiment back for, 4 weeks or less. So if we get down to that crunch time, we may make the decision to finish the class of 2021, 22, and 23 with distance learning. More to follow. When we make that decision, we will let you know. Okay, question number one, will there be a graduation ceremony? What are the contingency plans for graduation? I did talk through that, but again, I'm also considering if we were to do something different than the graduation on tomb field, what would that look like? We've already lined up a consideration for graduation speakers, maybe pre-recorded, virtual feed into the graduation ceremony. We're working hard. The Dep Soup runs the graduation committee. George Ryan is on that. We've had a lot of discussion this week alone. So we'll convey that information as we know more about it. I want it to be the nicest graduation ceremony we can have given our circumstances. That is my commitment with that. So we're working on it. First class, timeline for finishing coursework. License exams, what's the plan and backup? I think I addressed that. There's a lot going on with that. I will even tell you we're looking at potential legislative help in this area. I'm not going to talk in detail about that. It's premature, but there's nothing off the page in terms of considering how to address the graduation, license exams, et cetera. So we're working hard on that. When I have definitive information, more than what I've shared with you, I will definitely ensure that you're aware of that. We're working closely with the Coast Guard on all contingency plans. It was very nice to find an alum, Maite Medina, who is a GS-15 over there in the licensing group and credentialing group. She's an alum. She was a Panamanian exchange student. She's done extremely well. She's actually married to a Coast Guard admiral, and she's totally committed to helping this institution get over this hurdle. So I've enjoyed, and we've agreed that we're going to talk every Monday to find out how things are changing, the focus being on the graduation and license exam, et cetera. So that's a work in progress, and we'll continue. First-class courses that require CAD, physical labs, physical testing, advanced firefighting, machine elements. What's the plan for that? And is there a backup? CAD is not on the midshipman's computer. We're working on that as well. We're aware, I mentioned advanced firefighting as one example, but what about bridge resource management? How are we going to manage that? And yes, some of the engineering programs. We're looking at that. We're exploring different ways in which we can manage that. Perhaps if we are able to bring them back here, we can do a condensed, intense 5-day BRM course. All of these things are being explored by our faculty and our dean. As we get definitive steps along the way, we'll share that with you. The one that I'm committed to share with you is on the advanced firefighting and that online course. Okay, so that process is quite dynamic. Don't assume that we are aware of and working every aspect of that. If you have any concerns, please advise your midshipmen to pass them along to their instructors and the faculty so that we can make sure that we have a plan for that. My guess is we do, but on the risk of forgetting one, I think it would be helpful for them if they have a question to pass that along to their instructors. Can the Academy confirm that ABET accreditation will still happen, including what the plans are for these midshipmen to finish and present their group capstone projects? ABET is not affected by this. The group capstones will be modified, at least in the presentation part, but they will continue. Next question. Will the class of 2020 be able to take licensing exams at the Academy, or is there an alternate plan? Again, we're working on that. I gave you some brief insight to what the lead case is, which again, we want it in O'Hara Hall. We want to observe social distancing in O'Hara Hall while we're administering the exam. We feel we can do that. So if the state and local restrictions are lifted and we're permitted to do that, that is our lead case. And we have the flexibility of doing that anytime from the middle of May through the end of July. It's not that we couldn't do it beyond July, but we really have to address other issues associated with bringing on the class of 2024. I'll just give you a snapshot. Pretend you're the commandant and you're asked the question, can you bring on a new class while you still have the class of 2020? What's the commandant going to do? He's going to explore every place that he could put a midshipman. That might be one of the CO's room or BO's room. It might be a couple of rooms in Patton. It could be occupying the King's Pointer. This is the depth of effort that the commandant's staff is putting in. I haven't heard a no, we can't do it. They're looking at it. It would be a real tight situation, but that's on the drawing board to consider. So it's not beyond the scope of possibility that we could extend beyond July, but it does deal with problems like that. And so we'll be working with you on that and let you know what information comes out of those efforts. So next question, what are your priorities when making decisions regarding the midshipmen? Well, that's an easy one. It's the health and safety of our midshipmen. Sometimes we got to take ourselves from the myopic view of we need to get our midshipmen graduated. We need to get through this trimester. We need to bring it up maybe a mile high and look down. First and foremost, we need to make sure we all stay healthy and absolutely keep our midshipmen healthy. We have not gained an inch if all of a sudden we do something that causes a problem with the infection of our midshipmen. So first and foremost, the priority is ensure the health and safety of our classes, our regiment. So, as we stated at the beginning of the call, the safety, health, and well-being of the broader Academy community, including the regiment, is our primary concern. That's followed closely by graduation and licensing for the class of 2020 and the reception for the class of 2024. The classes of 2021, 22, and 23 are also priorities for education and training. But I'll tell you, I think that we have the necessary time to recover if their training is significantly disrupted, which is not the case at this point. So keep that in mind. Other than the health and welfare, again, the priority is graduating the class of 2020, and that's not at the expense of the other classes. But in order to fulfill the mission of this academy, we need to graduate our midshipmen. Will there be a bell-ringing ceremony? That's the next question. As you can tell by my prior comments, we're working on that. As an alum, I remember that very well. We definitely want to provide that for our graduating midshipmen. So it's something that it's not going to be a lack of help, a lack of effort that we can't achieve that, I assure you. If 2020 cannot return to Kings Point for graduation, etc., what are plans for securing or returning their personal gear? Between their rooms and company storage lockers, each 2020 midshipman has a lot of personal gear at Kings Point. What are the plans to inventory, store, and return of the class of 2020 if they don't return to the campus? We are working on that very contingency in the event that we have to execute something along those lines. Captain Stroud and his team have the lead, and we communicate appropriate plans when and if the time comes. And I'll tell you something, we can see which first-classmen aren't parking their cars in the first-class parking lot. So we have everything from cars to athletic gear and equipment in the dorms, in our barracks. We're looking at that. We also have potentially funds if we do need to ship those, but that's a work in progress. Just know that we will continue to work on that. I'm hoping that's not going to be necessary and that our midshipmen will be able to take it with them after graduation. Again, that's our lead case, but we are developing contingency plans if we cannot do that. Next question, how long can we put off graduation ceremony decision before they have to decide? I will tell you that, again, with what I described, that's a rolling decision. We're going to move it to the right on the timeline. The Coast Guard's flexible and is going to work with us on that. As far as graduation at the Academy, right now, we can see that that could occur up until the last week in July without becoming really, really difficult in trying to figure out logistics after that. That is not me telling you that we can't extend it beyond that. I'm just saying for the time being, we have these months to be able to manage it. One of the fortunate aspects of being the United States Merchant Marine Academy is we're the last Federal Service Academy to graduate. The Air Force Academy is graduating on April 18th. You may have heard about that. And then the Naval Academy is likely to graduate virtually sometime after that. Again, we're all working through that together, but we're fortunate in that we're the last one. So there's a lot of water to try to navigate through before we have to make that decision. And then even when May comes, we have June and July till. I'm really hopeful that we're going to make graduation happen here at the Academy. C-term, question. We think it's safe to say everyone in the United States has been affected in some way by the pandemic. Maritime corporations are no different as they work through the challenges brought on by the situation. It has had an impact on our ability to assign and move sea-year cadets, at least for the time being. We are working closely with the Coast Guard to understand and apply interim temporary measures like the reduction in the amount of sea time required for licensing. I will tell you, Captain Gene Albert and the shipboard training folks, they're working real hard on developing all kinds of contingencies. You know, with the mercy and the comfort that provided unexpected billets that we have the potential to fill. We're looking at ROS vessels and potential to maybe provide berths for midshipmen. We can learn from the Coast Guard we can get 20 days potential credit by doing that. We do know most of our folks on sea-year splits are on board ships, and they'll remain on board ships until they're relieved. There have been a number of midshipmen that have been stuck in the middle, either not able to join because the shipping company has refused them, or not able to get on board a ship because the policy of the shipping company has changed with regard to cadet shipping. We will work through those cases. We will do everything we can to manage the needs of our midshipmen. And that's going to be a work in progress. Next question, what does sea-year look like for the second class and the third class? Again, the Coast Guard temporary measures reduce sea time requirements for the classes of 2020 and 21. At this time, we don't expect any issues to affect the class of 21 or the classes beyond. Nearly all of the 22B splits are at sea, or as I mentioned, at an internship. If pressed, you know, I'm reading off a page here. We do have 20 unassigned in midshipmen who are unable to join on an assignment. They're going to get our attention. We're going to work it out for them. Now, what is the plan for sea term relative to safe destinations in light of the pandemics? The cadets work aboard vessels wherever the corporation may send them. They, like us, are committed to the health, safety, and well-being of the crew members. Additionally, the Department of Shipboard Training is following the State Department and company guidelines for detaching and joining locations. Your midshipmen that are out there are safe. They're being handled by the safety protocol of our shipping companies. Having been the CEO of one, I can tell you they are robust. Next question, inquiring about the lack of sea days for midshipmen? What accommodations will be made to compensate should the current situation continue for an extended period of time? Again, the temporary measures from the Coast Guard with regard to sea time requirements is going to help 20 and 21. At this point in time, we think we're going to be able to get them all the days they need, and we'll manage issues as they develop. Next question, is there a plan to put midshipmen on military ships? And we continue to place cadets aboard military vessels as we have in the past. And we'll continue to look in that direction as we have the billets to place. Will the Coast Guard make any exceptions for classes and sea days needed to take the exam? All days need to be made up. As I mentioned again, the Coast Guard has been great with the concessions so far. It's going to make it much easier to achieve the sea time necessary for sitting for a license with these concessions. So the classes of 20 and 21 should be in good stead over the next year or two in developing the sea time necessary to sit. Next question, there are midshipmen ordered to stay on their ships who are now missing shipyard management internships. By the time some are scheduled to get back, classes will have already started. Are provisions being made for those midshipmen to be able to pursue their shipyard management degrees? Or will USMMA try to get midshipmen off those ships in time to set up an internship over the summer? Department of Shipboard Training is working with Marine Engineering to assist cadets on the issue of shipyard internships. We are also developing an in-residence course for those shipyard majors that were unable to complete their shipyard internships. Next question, what happens if a midshipman or anyone on their ship gets sick while in a foreign port, for instance, Guam? Would midshipmen be sent home after quarantine, or would they remain on board the ship? The answer is a crew member is repatriated home once well enough to travel. In health and medical concerns, what requirements are being implemented for those who may have been exposed or tested positive to extend their time away from Kings Point? Midshipmen who report that they have been exposed or tested positive for COVID-19 are directed to contact their local physician by telephone, not to report in person unless told to do so. The local physician will follow the existing and current CDC and local Department of Health guidance and advise the midshipmen accordingly. The Office of Health Services requests that all midshipmen keep our healthcare team informed of such an event by calling the following number, and we'll give this to Keith, 516-726-5680. Again, that's 516-726-5680, and it's option number 3. Or they can email the Office of Health Services at medical@usmma.edu. That's medical@usmma.edu. Next question. How are the barracks and the facilities where the midshipmen live and take classes being sanitized and readied for the eventual return of the midshipmen? We have the resources, and we have our GSK folks that are corporate source folks, rather, working very hard daily. I see them covered up and cleaning another part of the academy every day. God bless them. I'm glad we have them. Admiral Dunlap has them sterilizing all of the academy spaces. So that is currently going on, and we have the resources available by Congress to make sure that we're able to pay for that. Cleanliness and preventative hygiene is a big part of living at the barracks and learning in the classroom, and will continue to ensure they are maintained in a high state of cleanliness. Our custodial workforce, as I mentioned, has been fully engaged in disinfecting and cleaning using CDC-approved chemicals in classroom, living, common, and office areas at the academy. In addition, the Office of Health Services is staffed by healthcare providers from the Northwell Health System, the largest healthcare employer on Long Island and the third largest in the nation. All infection control procedures common to their health system for all infectious diseases are followed at Patton Hall. Next question. What medical services, equipment, medication, etc., is available at Kings Point in the event of subsequent contraction of the virus after the midshipmen return? The USMMA Office of Health Services is staffed with a physician, a physician's assistant, a registered nurse, and medical assistants, all received and have been certified in Joint Commission and CDC-approved infection control management training. Health Services is fully stocked with all infection control supplies, including N95 masks, gowns, and gloves. A separate isolation examination room has been identified. All midshipmen who enter Health Services are screened, and if they are symptomatic or present meeting potential exposure criteria, they are provided with a mask and placed into the isolation exam room. Our healthcare staff then coordinate care with the North Shore University Hospital up to and including transport via Northwell ambulance to their emergency room for further care and evaluation. As a precaution, single berthing space has been established in Patton Hall, separate and distinct from all other patient and staff contact. These rooms are fully stocked for patient care and include Wi-Fi as well as telephone access and private bathrooms. These rooms can be used to isolate a midshipman from the regiment to minimize or eliminate cross-infections during any longer-term care. Next question about logistics. What plans have been established for returning to school? I think I covered that, but we are standing by and in tune with every day with what's evolving in terms of federal, state, and local rules, in terms of what can be done, in terms of social media and folks gathering in groups of greater than 10. We're looking at all options at this point in time. Next question, how to retrieve mail that may be in the mailboxes that are important or time sensitive. The midshipmen should work through their company officers and battalion officers if there is an urgent, time-sensitive item that they must have. We will work with them, and we'll work to get them those items. So again, those midshipmen should contact their COs and BOs if there's an urgent item, time-sensitive item in their mailboxes. Next question. There are academic essentials, textbooks, and other things that midshipmen left behind. Is there a way of getting those things? Academics is working with the Commandant staff to get required items to midshipmen. The academic department is also considering providing study materials to our midshipmen where that becomes necessary for things like license prep. They're working on that. The Dean will have more information in the upcoming days as to how we plan to do that. Next question. What criteria or considerations are being examined in order to issue a return order? Again, I've talked a lot about that. We're looking at a number of considerations that could affect the return of the midshipman. There are many factors that we'll have to consider before any date will be finalized. All options are on the table. All we can provide with certainty right now is our strong promise to keep you informed as we make our decisions. And also my commitment and that of our leadership that we want to get them back here just as safe as it is to do so. Is it likely the regiment will finish the year via distance learning? I covered that. It is definitely possible. We might even go as far as to say highly likely for the current class of 2021, 22, and 23, but we have not made that decision yet. When we do, you will know it. We are very much, though, as a priority, I mentioned, if any class comes back, we are definitely prioritizing the class of 2020. That will depend upon the social distancing requirements, et cetera, the isolation requirements that may become involved with doing that. We can manage one class to keep them socially distant. We can't manage the regiment that way. We are finding that the distance learning approach is actually pretty effective for just traditional academic courses. I've had the opportunity to converse with a number of midshipmen. The ones that I spoke to said, yeah, it's a challenge. It's kind of tough. In some cases, it's harder than being at the academy. but they're managing through it, and they actually said some nice things about our faculty and our teachers in terms of the effort that they're putting in. I'm sure there's a lot of stories there that are both glowing and some that may not be, but overall, I really am very gracious about what our faculty and administration have been able to do with distance learning. When the midshipmen are to report back, how much time will be given for us to make flight arrangements? Will the Academy pay for the return flight? I don't know. I will tell you, we're looking at that. What is a reasonable amount of time? Off the top of my head, I'd say it's probably at least 2 weeks. Many will think that's not enough time, but in this time and this state of affairs, that might be all that we're able to manage. Off the top of my head, I'm saying that we're looking at hopefully having that 2-week window to make a decision to bring them back. Will that represent hardship in terms of travel costs, et cetera? Not sure. We'll have to see. We'll look at that, and we'll consider all issues associated with that, but that is a work in progress. Is there an anticipated return date being considered, or at a minimum, time that students should expect to shelter at home? For example, through April or through May? Well, through April is a given. That's a requirement. We couldn't bring anyone back before May 1st, and the likeliness of that happening is slim at this point. Still, we haven't made a decision that won't happen, but I think right around the end of April is a decision-making point where we'll try to identify the earliest point in time when we could bring them back. So don't be surprised if on May 1st we say, hey, things look great, everything's working well across the country, we're going to establish May 15th as a date to bring folks back. Do I think that's likely? No, I do not. But that's when we start pushing the window to the right. Starting on May 1st, we'll start looking at whether we can bring them back May 15th. If not, can we bring them back June 1st? If not, can we bring them back June 15th? It might be a 2-week period, it might be a 1-week period. We'll work that, but it's going to likely slide to the right. But we are devoted to trying to make that happen, and certainly make it happen before the end of July. School and coursework concerns. The next question, how will the lack of labs and simulators impact the completion of terms classes? We're working on all alternative means to address that. I don't have all the answers right now. There will be cases where we can have an alternative form of that available. Give us a little bit more time to work that. But there is another question. What provision, if any, is the Academy making to allow alternative grading options like pass or no pass? We are not going to consider a pass-fail type system. Next question. My son is a midshipman in the class of 2021, and he aspires to be commissioned into the Marine Corps upon graduation. Good for him. As such, he has to complete the Leatherneck program in June 2020. Several of his A-split classmates have already had the opportunity to attend this training. As it is crucial to his career path, I was wondering what is being done for those midshipmen that need to attend these mandatory trainings with their USNA or ROTC counterparts. Well, currently, Leatherneck has not been canceled for the classes in which midshipmen are slated. If the Naval Academy decides to cancel, then the U.S. Marine Corps representative will work other options to get our midshipman commission. So stay tuned. That's developing. But right now, Leatherneck classes have not been canceled. A question about indoctrination. If 2020 does not graduate on time, will 2024 indoctrination be pushed back? Or is there room for everyone on campus? I addressed that earlier. The Commandant is looking at all scenarios there, including the possibility of beginning that class with distance learning. And when it's safe to accommodate them at the Academy, then perhaps bring them back to a condensed indoctrination at that time. So anyway, that's a work in progress. Reimbursement. The Academy has received money to help set up distance learning. Will any of this money be used to reimburse students who had to purchase licensed prep materials or internet service, computer hardware, to be able to work from home? So far, the Academy has or is making arrangements to provide midshipmen with all required course and licensed prep materials at the Academy expense. Midshipmen should not be purchasing materials on their own unless explicitly instructed to do so. We are aware of a handful of 2020 midshipmen who did purchase license prep material independently, and we're working to correct that situation. Any midshipman needing to acquire dedicated internet service or computer hardware to take an online instruction should contact the Academy prior to purchase to determine what, if any, accommodation we would be able to make available. Last question. Will the third trimester fees, which have been paid already, be refunded or credited? The services covered by the fees have been suspended, and the third trimester fees will be adjusted accordingly. The Academy is still working to determine how refunds or credits will be issued. So at this point in time, I'd like to turn it over to the moderator, Kenny, to open it up to questions. Kenny will talk to you on how they'll be accomplished. So, Kenny, would you take it from here?
I'd love to. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, if you wish to ask a question, please press 1 then 0 on your telephone keypad. You may withdraw your question at any time by repeating the 1-0 command. If you are using a speakerphone, please pick up the handset before pressing the numbers. Once again, if you'd like to ask a question, please press 1 then 0 at this time. And one moment, please.
And while we're waiting for Kenny to log in the questions, let me just finish a couple of items. You know, the National Parents Association has been very gracious through Keith and Brian. You've really been there and much, much appreciated. The question is, what can the parents do to help us at the Academy? And thanks for that. You've been doing it. Being on the call now is an example of helping us. Keep your midshipmen studying. It's a total change for them. Some will find it easy. Some will find it a lot more difficult. Try and help them stay focused on that. Distance learning is their challenge now. They are midshipmen that understand active non-verba, so I trust that they will figure out how to get through that. And then, you know, there's another question. And what should the parents not be doing if there's something we shouldn't be doing? And I would say in that regard, please don't spread rumors. I know it's difficult at this point in time. We take a piece of information and we want to bounce it off someone else or share it. And unfortunately, sometimes rumors get started that way. I've made the commitment. I'm going to do my very best to provide you all the information that we're working off of, at least all the information that I'm legally allowed to provide you. And that's my commitment to you. So in return, I'd like a commitment, if you could give it, to funneling the questions that you're hearing or the issues you're hearing, maybe the rumors you're hearing, funnel them through your leadership and get them to us. I want to be able to answer those questions. And again, while we're taking the questions, I want to finish up and ask you to connect with us in perhaps ways you haven't yet. So, Kenny, I'll open it up to questions.
Thank you. Our first question comes from Jason Merchant. Please go ahead, sir.
Hi, Admiral. First of all, thank you. The Facebook posts that you've been doing, and this is great. My question is, my son is at sea right now. With the changes that you made with the sea days to help make up some of the sea days kids are missing, will he be brought back earlier than had been originally planned? And how does that work if he has to get off a ship in quarantine? Because a lot of the states he can't get to without quarantining as soon as he gets here, like Massachusetts, where I am.
Yeah, Jason, I don't have a definitive answer for you. I would tell you that the midshipmen that are on board will be allowed off when the shipping companies determine that it's safe to do so, and they have a safe berth to be able to let them off at. And our Department of Shipboard training feel that it's safe to get them from that location home. You know, the number of days they have will be kind of inconsequential to those overriding concerns of safety.
Great. Thank you.
Sure.
Thank you. And now to the line of Joe Finnegan. Please go ahead, sir.
Hey, Admiral. Thank you for taking my call. As you know, the class of 2020 has a large contingent that are planning on going active duty. As we push further to the right, possibly from graduation, this will have an effect on them for the rest of their careers for seniority dates, start dates at their billet assignments. They may be missing those start dates. Has any thought been given into some way of working around that where they can start the commissioning process so they meet that commitment because that's the career path they're choosing? Thank you.
Joe, the answer is yes. There's a lot going on with that. Unfortunately, I'm going to have to ask for your patience in that some of these items involve legislation, and there's, it's inappropriate and premature to share the details of what I mean by that. But please trust that, number one, I am very sensitive to the fact that 34% of our graduating class have chosen to fulfill their commitment by going active duty in the services. They are already going to be being commissioned after the other federal service academies, and I do not want to see them commissioned after ROTC or OS or for Canada's OCS schools. So we're going to make every attempt to get them able to be commissioned just as soon as we can. It is a priority. There's a number of things that we're looking at and working to facilitate that. I'm cautiously optimistic.
All right, thank you. And now to the line of Chris Misson. Please go ahead.
Hi. So our question is, for the class of 2023, what is the plan to recognize them or to black flag them? Thank you.
To recognize, or I'm going to turn that over to Mike Stroud. If you have an answer for that, Mike, feel free to provide it.
Right now, the plebes, before they left out of here, are 3/4 of the way through their recognition steps. If we do not get the midshipmen or the plebes back here this school year, we'll probably do a little mini ceremony once we do get them back. They'll be counted as recognized. Recognition is nothing more than an internal fun day that we do for the midshipmen. So they'll carry on, and they'll be third-classmen once they do come back here. It should not be a large deal.
All right, thank you. And now to the line of Julie Walco. Please go ahead.
Hi, good evening, Admiral, and everyone on the line. Thanks so much for all the wonderful information. Just a quick question on the 1.25 to 1 sea-day ratio that the Coast Guard is working for. Does that apply to military MSC ships as well as the commercial ships?
The answer to that is yes. It does, and we're very pleased that. I want to go back to, if I could, Joe, I'm not sure I finished where I wanted to with your question. I am very sensitive, we are all very sensitive, that the commissioning date of an officer that's serving in the military is extremely important. They carry that through their career. So, yes, we're sensitized to that, and we are doing everything we can to ensure we get them able to be commissioned as soon as possible.
All right, thank you. Again, if you'd like to ask a question, please press 1 then 0 on your touch-tone phone. And now to the line of Mike Corcoran. Please go ahead.
Hey, sir, and everyone else. Thanks for what you do. Quick question for you. You already touched on it briefly. Whatever 5-meter targets are out there that you need help with, both, not just you, but all the midshipmen. What are those things that maybe the parents can help with? But then some of us out here are reserve officers already wearing a uniform and or work in the industry somewhere. Is there anything that we can do to, help the effort, right, to gain that capacity while all these adjustments to training are being considered? And that's even if it's proctoring exams, labs, whatever it takes. We're willing to work through that one as a resource for you. Is there anything we can do there?
Mike, let me start by saying I really appreciate, that offer. And I think as we move forward, we're going to continue to get more and more creative. And there will be a time, I predict in the future, where we'll be able to start to identify areas where that kind of help will become very useful. That kind of help may become useful in being able to facilitate maybe alternate exam sites. I don't know. No guarantee. I'm just giving an example. Being there at alternate exam sites to help the mobilized folks from the Coast Guard administer exam. That's possible as well. Perhaps being able to provide shelter, room, and board for midshipmen that are in a different location to take an exam at another site. There's a lot of things that I can think of off the top of my head where there may be a great use that your gracious offer could provide. So stay tuned. I think this is, again, uncharted waters, but there's no one at Kings Point that is afraid to navigate through uncharted waters. So we know how to do that. And that kind of offer is a good example of acta non verba. I appreciate it. More to follow.
Thank you. We have no more questions in queue.
Okay. I would like to finish by asking everyone on the phone, please, if you haven't already done so, recognize that our primary vehicle, our preferred vehicle for communicating with you is through social media. Let me be a little bit more explicit. Because of the Academy and how we are set up here, we do not have a staff of an audiovisual team to do a high-definition video every week organized with a group of around 20 people. Our team is George Rindans, and George does an extraordinary job. We have determined that through social media, Facebook, some YouTube, but Facebook, Twitter, and our webpage, we do a pretty good job in putting out information daily. Some of you are not connected yet to those sources. Some, I think, as the other federal service academies, their preferred vehicle tends to be through emails. We could explore doing that, but that's more problematic for us. So I would really encourage you to consider connecting with us through social media. It's going to be the same information. I just think that if you are, we're going to be able to communicate more effectively that way. And then you have my commitment to try to over-communicate rather than under-communicate. So I'll make sure that Keith and Brian have been great, that they post what the social media sites are and give you a link or how to connect. But I thank you very much for hanging with me, if you have, for the length of time that we've been together. I can only imagine that there's things on TV that are far more interesting than to listen to an old superintendent yap for an hour and 10 minutes. But it's testimony to the support of this very important organization called the National Parents Association. You're a very important stakeholder for us. Like I said, you're an enabler. And please help me help you be as effective as you can be in supporting this incredible group of America's finest we call our midshipmen. The mission of the United States Merchant Marine Academy is to graduate leaders of exemplary character. We will do that. Thanks for spending time with me. This is just a continuum. I will also point out, starting tomorrow morning, we're going to have what I call with classes. So tomorrow morning, I'm going to meet for a half hour with the class of 2020, share some of the information that you've already heard, and then individually have the classes to follow. Next one will be Thursday with the class of 2021, so we can address their specific concerns. So more to follow. Let's continue to communicate. Let's also pause when we hear something we don't like and try to validate it, try to stay at a point where we're transmitting accurate information. So far, you've been doing a phenomenal job with that. Thank you so much for your support. Good night. Stay healthy. Be safe. Acta non verba.